talk about now the unholy trinity that is the Democratic Party, academia, and the corporate media. Specifically, this relates to their treatment of Harvard Law School alums and prominent TV legal analysts Alan Dershowitz and Jeffrey Tobin. The disparate way Professor Dershowitz and Jeffrey Tobin are now treated by the media tells you everything you need to know about the media's relationship with the law. It's kind of like their relationship with the science. It's their relationship based on convenience. When the definition of the law fits their narrative, they point to the law. When it doesn't, they dismiss their critics as conspiracy theorists or liars or worse. Alan Dershowitz has not been shy about taking unpopular positions. The New Yorker called him the devil's advocate, citing his representation of people like O.J. Simpson, Mike Tyson, and disgraced junk bonds financier Michael Milken. And now Dershowitz is calling President Trump's lawsuit against big tech, quote, the most important First Amendment lawsuit of the 21st century. Here he was on Newsmax yesterday.
Well, this case is one of the most important First Amendment cases in my lifetime, and I did the Pentagon Papers case and the I Am Curious Yellow case. I argued cases in the Supreme Court. This is really important because it presents a great constitutional paradox. It pits freedom of speech against the First Amendment.
And for that, Professor Dershowitz was panned by the legal scholars over at Check's Notes here. Raw story? Raw story? Well, who are these legal scholars, you ask? They include a woman named Miranda Yaver. Who is she? Well, she is a constitutional law professor. You can see her in her Twitter profile here. She's holding a Biden sign. She's also a professor at Oberlin College, which is an incubator for the ultra-progressive left. So Dr. Yaver is not exactly an unbiased legal scholar here. Raw Story also cites Congressman Ted Lieu as one of their legal scholars. Lieu does have a law degree from Georgetown. The congressman also went all in, of course, on the resistance to President Trump. And he's also known for getting schooled in congressional hearings like this one in which Candace Owens owns him after he tried to accuse her of advocating on behalf of Adolf Hitler.
I'm going to play for you the first 30 seconds of a statement she made about Adolf Hitler.
He is assuming that black people will not go pursue the full 2-hour clip. And he purposefully extracted, he cut off, and you didn't hear the question that was asked of me. He's trying to present as if I was launching a defense of Hitler in Germany, when in fact, the question that was asked of me was pertaining to whether or not I believed that Hitler was whether or not I believed in nationalism, and that nationalism was bad. And what I responded to was that I do not believe that we should be characterizing Hitler as a nationalist. He was a homicidal, psychopathic maniac that killed his own people. A nationalist would not kill their own people. That is exactly what I was referring to in the clip, and he purposely wanted to give you a cut-up similar to what they do to Donald Trump to create a different narrative.
And there it was. And you saw the look on Liu's face there. Imagine being a U.S. congressman with degrees from Stanford and Georgetown and getting schooled by Candace Owens in the halls of Congress. Now, as it relates to Harvard, Liu, who was born in Taiwan, likes to say the federal government is biased against Asian Americans. But watch how he shouts at a member of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission for calling out Harvard's anti-Asian discrimination in its admissions policy.
In fact, just yesterday or day before yesterday, I filed a brief in the Students for Fair Admissions against Harvard case in the Supreme Court.
Stop bringing in irrelevant issues. There are more Asian Americans at these Ivy Leagues. Underrepresented. These are different issues happening.
In other words, how dare you bring up actual discrimination and systemic racism? It doesn't fit our narrative, after all. Now, this brings us back to the way the media, academia, and Democrats treat the law and Alan Dershowitz and Jeffrey Tobin. Dershowitz has been accused of a lot of things. Some of these accusations are serious and deserve due process. Now, the concept of due process exists because it is the best way to ensure justice for the accuser and the accused. And yet, because Professor Dershowitz takes positions that are unpopular with the dominant groupthink of the left and the media, it's fine to discount his legal analysis and call for Harvard to cancel him in response to his support for President Trump's lawsuit. Now, these are some of the same people doing this who he praised on Jeffrey Tobin's legal analysis, when in fact it's Tobin who has been the one actually forced to admit in legal proceedings that he did some pretty terrible things. You all, of course, already know about his suspension from CNN and his firing from The New Yorker for getting caught masturbating on a Zoom call, I should say The Atlantic, for that incident on a Zoom call. We are not talking about that, though. What we are talking about is this. The New York Daily News reported back in 2010 that a married Tobin got his mistress and coworker pregnant. She was much younger than him at the time, and he offered her money if she'd have an abortion. This again was according to the Daily News. When Tobin's mistress wouldn't have that abortion, Jeff Tobin told her that she was going to regret it and she shouldn't expect any help from him. The New York Times later did a deep dive on this, and they reported that Tobin ultimately acquiesced to a paternity test, and that confirmed that he was in fact the father of the boy. But that was close to 3 years later. And at the time of Tobin's reinstatement at CNN most recently, a Wall Street Journal op-ed said this, quote, "Even if Jeffrey Tobin is in fact the indispensable legal mind CNN evidently believes he is, his reinstatement proves as long as your work furthers the mission, no failure in behavior, no error in reporting or editing, or corruption of the truth or evidence will go unrewarded." I guess the opposite is true for Professor Dershowitz and people like him. That includes Rudy Giuliani or Jenna Ellis, who's on this show a lot. You know, Giuliani has had his law licenses revoked in New York and now Washington, D.C. as well. Now, as long as those legal opinions and that work hurts the mission of the left, those folks will continue to face these kinds of personal attacks. Now,
you just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.